Welcome back to the Colossal Color Showdown. This is episode 7 and we're going to continue having a good look at Payne's Grey. In the previous episode we had a look at the wash and transparency and glazing and the lift of the Payne's Grey. In this episode we're going to look at gradated washes, salt test and the color mixes. One thing I did forget to do in the last episode is go through what pigments are used by these different brands. As I said in the last episode, they're normally made with blue and black pigment and sometimes a pink violet kind of pigment as well. And for the blue pigment, the majority of the brands use either ultramarine blue, which is the PB29, or the phthalo blue, which is the PB15, and different variations. Some uses PB15:1, which is phthalo blue red shade, and some use PB15:3, which is the phthalo blue green shade. There's two exceptions to those two pigments. One is the Da Vinci, as I said, which is made with Prussian blue, which is the PB27, and then strangely, Van Gogh actually doesn't have any blue in them. It is just made with PBK6 and PV19. It's interesting that this apparently doesn't have any blue pigments in them, because one of the first things that I noticed when I created the Gradated Wash was that in particular with Van Gogh, you see this very obvious blue lines forming in between the different stages of adding water to the gradated washes. Other brands do them a little bit, such as Holbein and Daniel Smith. However, it's very noticeable when it comes to Van Gogh, and for this reason alone, I would probably rule out using the Van Gogh for myself, just because I don't want a surprise blue line happening when I'm not looking for a blue line. Besides the Van Gogh, you really do notice the huge difference when you water down the colour from the mass tone to a very faint version of that colour. And with the Da Vinci's one, the greenness that comes through really shows up. It's a very different hue down here where it's watered down to all of the other Payne's Grey. So if you are used to a Payne's Grey from a brand that does make them towards more of a traditional colour, you might have a problem with the Da Vinci one, just because it is a completely different colour. Talking of completely different colours, Schminke's one, as you can see, is very, very neutral black colour. You do see some blue coming through in the granulation, but on the whole, first impression, that is more of a neutral tint than the Payne's Grey. You notice the extra blueness coming through with the Winsor & Newton one. When you look at the Gradated Wash in general, it's a little bit lighter and a little bit more blue rather than black on the swatches. In terms of creating a smooth gradated washes, I think the worst performing one was the Schminke's one. If you notice, with all the other brands, you can see clear differentiation of stages. When I create these washes, I do add more water in 3 stages. So this is the mass tone, then I add more water, more water, more water. And it's always good to be able to see 4 different values in the swatches, because it means you're going to have much better control of when you come to create the gradated washes. However, with the Schminke's one, it's very noticeable that it have the mass tone, and then this big bit is pretty much the same value. There's no control in creating different values throughout the different concentration of paint to water ratio. So if you do a lot of gradated washes, I really do not recommend Schminke's Payne's Grey, because you will just have mass tone and then like flat colour for the rest of the time. And a similar things, although not as bad, can be said for Winsor & Newton's one and the Sennelier, Jackson's Art and Cassards. You're not seeing clear differentiation of value in the gradated washes as you see in Holbein or Daniel Smith. So if you want that finer control, then I would recommend brands such as Daniel Smith and Holbein over these brands basically over here. You might be looking at these two going, okay, you have the 4 values, but you also get a lot of cauliflowering. I want you to remember that when I create these gradated washes, I do add a lot more water to creating the gradated washes than I would do in a real painting. And that's just so that you can see the paint at its worst. And if it doesn't cauliflower in this test, it's just not going to cauliflower at all in your normal painting. However, if you do struggle with cauliflowering, then you might have a problem with Daniel Smith, Holbein, and probably Winsor and Newton. But again, this was done in the worst case scenario rather than the normal case scenario. Now let us move on to the salt test. With the salt test, as it has been for all the colors we've tried so far, we got a varied reaction from all the brands to salt. Some colors such as the Cassatt, Jackson, Snellier, Core and Van Gogh didn't react to salt that much. However, Schmincke and Winsor Newton reacted to salt really well. So if you are into using salt to create textures on your paintings, then I actually recommend Schmincke and Winsor Newton. But as I've already said, these two have their own issues that you need to take into consideration. Then the 4 over here, the Daniel Smith, Holbein, M. Graham and Da Vinci, is a medium reacting to salt. And in general, these have so far been the better behaving colors than these two. So if you are into your salt but you don't want to start having hue problems, then I would actually recommend these 3, but probably not this one, because you will see in the next test that this color really does cause some problem in your color mixes. And finally, we take a look at the color mixes. For this episode with Payne's Grey, the complementary color for it is a yellow-orange color. And that is because Payne's Grey is a more neutralized blue, but it's more blue than any other color. So its complementary color will be the yellow-orange. Looking at this sheet, the first thing I notice is the Holbein's swatches. The Holbein's Payne's Grey is the lowest tinting color in the 11 brands that we tested, and that can be good or bad. It just depends on what you're looking for. Colors that have lower tinting strength in a range of the same color can be useful if you do have a palette that doesn't have a lot of quins, phthalos and azoles, those really intense, bright, strong colors. If you don't have many of those, then this is actually a nice color to go for, because this is going to match the tinting strengths of all your other colors, which means you're not going to have a palette that has one particularly really strong color that runs over all the other colors when you're trying to do the mixes. But if you're like me and do have a lot of quins and phthalos on your palette, you probably want to avoid the Holbein's one, because it's just going to get lost in the color mixes with those really strong colors. You want to choose a Payne's Grey that has a higher tinting strength so that it can change the color of a quin or a phthalo color effectively without having to use a load of the Payne's Grey. Daniel Smith and Winsor Newton also struggles with tinting strengths a little bit, but nowhere near as bad as Holbein. And I don't really know why Holbein has such low tinting strengths, because these two are explainable. As we saw on the main wash page, that these two are in general just a lot lighter version of the Payne's Grey, whereas Holbein's Payne's Grey is pretty dark. It just doesn't have as strong a tinting strength as all the other Payne's Grey. The Payne's Grey that is most affected by its original hue is the Da Vinci's one. Because it does have that little bit of a greenness to it, it really affects the color mixes that you can create with your Payne's Grey. So when we take a look at, say, mixing it with the yellow, then this is definitely a different color to all the other greens that we managed to produce on this sheet. And the same goes for mixing with the primary red. which is a magenta color. The violet that it creates is definitely a different shade to most of the other colors. So although the Da Vinci's one has performed really well in all the tests, the hue difference, if you are used to other brands already, is going to cause some problems, or it's going to take a while for you to get used to how it color mixes differently from all the other brands. There's a little bit of a color mixing difference with the Schmincke's one, Schmincke being the one that was very neutralized, almost black color rather than a blue-gray color, and it does have some effect on the color mixes, but it's nowhere near as bad as the Da Vinci's one. So I guess it just depends on what you're used to and what you're expecting from a Payne's Grey, whether you should try the Da Vinci's one or not, because it does behave really nicely in everything else. It's just a hue problem. It is different from all the other brands. If watching this series have really inspired you to try your own comparison and it's made you want to play with colors from lots of different brands, over on my Patreon, for each month I am creating a dot card that follows this series. This month is Phthalo Turquoise. So if you want to try 8 different brands of Phthalo Turquoise and find your very own favorite color, then do sign up over on patreon.com/Oto Kano. If you are interested in the Payne's Grey one, that will come in April. So be sure to be signed up over on my Patreon in April. So that was comparing Payne's Grey. Which color was your favorite? I think Payne's Grey, out of all the colors we've tried so far, is the one where you have to decide and be clear about what you want from a Payne's Grey, and then pick the one that suits the characteristics that you're looking for. In terms of ease of painting with it and just beautifully performing color, Da Vinci wins out, but it's a little bit wrong and it's not what I'm looking for from a Payne's Grey. Coral being the most expensive one, I probably wouldn't go for that. I would probably go more for either the M. Graham or the Holbein. They're mid-range price compared to the Coral one. Holbein does have their own issues, and M. Graham has the issue of it being too easy to re-wet for someone that doesn't use a lot of honey-based painting. But that is something I can definitely get used to, so I probably would go for the M. Graham. If you want to have a look at all the test sheets that I created for this series, they all go up over on my Patreon page, so do check them out, because I create high-res scans of these and put them up for your pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If this episode has changed your mind about which brand of Payne's Grey you like the most, then do let me know in the comments below. I love to hear about what made you change your mind about which brand to go for. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!